between with galvanists you probably get up to about 130, travelling at about 65 to about 80 kilometres along this section of track.
What if we had really good tracks? I mean, perfect tracks.
Good track, you'd be able to sit on 160 kilometres all the time. Yeah.
Ah, there she goes again. She's got a security problem, this snake.
Yeah! '91.
Oh. 5, 6.
It is really very necessary to travel, to give up a bit of time and travel down to Sydney on a 6-hour trip, because you don't know how you compare. It wasn't until I went to a science school that I knew there were other people as silly as I am who were interested in the same subject. Yes, they're
actual solar
days, they're actual Earth days.
Yeah.
And we have 10 per segment.
Yeah.
And if you count the segments, it can tell the sweeps out equal area and equal time.
That's how we determined it. Because of the rotation of the star, it rotates around just...
The other great advantage in travelling to Sydney is that you come in contact with some of the world's great scientists. You can share their logic and their intellectual level, and you know what to expect when you're there in a few years' time.
Black holes start
When
eating
here,
it.
yes.
If we don't get another object
It's going
up the top
in
there,
direction.
if there's a piece of dust going in the direction again.
I suppose one of the reasons I got interested in ducks to start with was through this place, Serendip Wildlife Research Station, as they carry out a lot of field work here on endangered species. And it was through mainly reading their reports and coming here and just looking around for myself that I got quite a few ideas, and it all really just flowed from there. Because of the drought of 1982, we were feeding sheep by hand with cereal grain such as barley and wheat, and it was through a spillage of this grain along the edge of a waterway that the whole project got started, actually. We found that there were a number of ducks that were congregating on the feed, and they kept returning as days passed. And at that stage I was heavily involved in biology at school, and with field research projects being started, I naturally thought, wouldn't it be a good idea just to see how many ducks would actually come to converge on this sort of feeding in drought conditions. And with the feeding commencing on the first night, we had about 9 ducks arrive, and that grew to about 113 within 10 days. But as we kept going, competition, predators, all sorts of common factors just began to inhibit the actual population that were beginning to swarm on the dam. And you found that they began to move away again from that 113 on the 10 days. By about the 90th day of the study, we were down to about 13 or 14 ducks. And it never really came up again from there.
I did most of my goanna work in the Australian Museum. I came to work in here because I was doing scientific illustration for my high school certificate artwork. There were all sorts of containers full of lizards labelled Varana scoldii. When I sorted these out, there were 2 very different types of lizards that were both under the name Varana scoldii goldii. So after having a closer look at not only their colour differences but structural differences, I found that there was enough to call it a separate species.
I've never seen this actual method of doing things before, because the great difference between this boomerang tracking and any other sort of tracking or whatever is that firstly this had to be cheap, which has made quite an effect, although we've still managed to keep it far beyond the accuracy of the old methods. And this one has a moving target, which is really the most important thing, because normally with theodolites and so on you can have surveyors there. Say with a ski jump you can see where it landed and you can set up, but when it comes to a boomerang you're actually following it.
102.
And the maximum distance can be anywhere in that path. So you can't just say, right, we're going to take the distance so many seconds from now. It has to really be tracked the whole way, and there is no way apart from with a computer that you can actually calculate all the distances as the boomerang goes round.
Hello, Lily.
Mum and Dad got our first bantams about 6 years ago, and they started laying eggs like anything. And because I've always been interested in embryology type things, and we had all the eggs, 4 chooks sitting on them, I did a project in which I took away an egg every day and opened it up and had a look at what stage of development the chook was in. And then I'd open them up and have a look inside them and dissect them. It took 3 hours an egg, but I really enjoyed that. And I'd keep things in bottles. And then I'd put that in the Science Talent Search. And the same year, my teacher put another one in for me on blue wrens, which also got a prize. I was pretty surprised about. And that I spent the weekend watching them and drawing pictures and writing down what they did and trying to take photos of them. And that was good. I didn't think it was very scientific at the time, but it seemed to be taken all right. And then the next year I really knew what I was on. I started knowing what I was on about, and I'd planned it out beforehand. And I did about mice and drugs. And that I had 8 mice, and I tested them in the treader wheel and the stress jar and the exploration box. And then I put coffee in the cage just for an hour. After I took the water away and I put the coffee in the cage, and I tested them again. And then I did it with Valium and alcohol. I mixed up the coffee vaguely, how a human would have it. To start with, it was just 1 rounded teaspoon to a cup, and then I doubled it because it wasn't getting very good results. And I'd just make it up a cup at a time and leave it. And it was in this side of the cage, and they just had it as their water. That was their liquid that's the only liquid they got. And the other side just had water in their bottle. And I was surprised to find that both drank the same amount of liquid. During the overnight, they would both drink the same amount. They didn't seem to mind the coffee at all.
In each one of these boxes is what's called an oscillator, which can make electricity go on and off very quickly, and the speed that it goes on and off is proportional to how far this is turned. And then the computer's able to count how many times it goes on and off and work out what speed it was at, therefore work out where this was turned, and using trigonometry it's able to work out from the 2 angles and the distances that I've given it of how far apart these are where the boomerang should be. And it actually has to calculate that for each point on the path as it goes round, and then gets the maximum. One of the advantages of using a computer in this particular situation was that it was able to make the calculations quite fast while the boomerang was going along. But one thing that I discovered was that even though the computer is very fast, it's still not fast enough to be able to work out the distance of a boomerang as the boomerang was flying. So one of the tricks I had to use was that instead of actually calculating all the trig as the boomerang was going, I made the computer build up a table of trigonometry. 91!
When I was in Form 1, I was dressing up a doll and I wanted to put a mouse skin coat on it. And so I skinned a mouse, partly just to see that I could do it. And then I skinned another one later, and one day I discovered they had kidneys, and I got really excited about that. And from then I went on and I skinned anything I could get hold of and dissected it and put things in little bottles of metho. And I suppose that was when I became really interested in science, and I knew I was interested in science and wanted to be a surgeon. That's C3 is in that position. On the tip was C1 and at the top was C4. Yeah, in you go. Starts at 8. I just trace in where they go. It's fairly typical, they tend to stay by the sides. It's really hard to follow them if they start moving fast. Yeah. And then I'd leave them in for a minute, and then they'd get points for every line they've crossed. So that would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 points. Time. I was really happy with the results I got for the short-term test. I had 2 base tests were exactly the same, and then after coffee they were a lot more active, after Valium they were a lot less active, and after alcohol they were just a little bit less active.
One thing I learnt when I first attended a science school at a university was that I'm not alone, I'm not a freak. There are other people with the same interests.
Yeah.
It's sort of, you can use ideas like...
no, we can't conceive what it is.
Yeah, you can use ideas like
conceive
examples,
it's a sphere.
just analogous sort of things like curving pieces of paper.
The sphere is for the 2-dimensional, we're 3-dimensional. It's impossible for us to conceive what actually does happen.
I mean, a sphere example is like a 2-dimensional world, right? Theoretical physics appeals to me because each problem is an individual challenge and there's so much that we don't know. And for me, theoretical physics is my attempt to improve our knowledge. It's a field which I'm interested in, which I feel I can extend our knowledge most. I enjoy the intellectual challenge. There's nothing to compare with it. I have 2 friends in Dubbo who go camping with me, an astronomy camp out. We take a telescope out of Dubbo away from the lights and do astronomy for all night. It's a great experience to get away, to camp out and just be in the dark, in the quiet, and absorbed by the complete surroundings. The entire dome of the sky completely surrounding it. It is a wonderful experience. My project is a theoretical project in astrophysics. Scientists believe that galaxies are moving away very rapidly because they observe what's called a redshift. My project discusses alternative explanations for this redshift.
Living here all my life, I've become very attached to the overall district, all its wildlife and its waterfowl. You drive anywhere now, even when I'm walking and you just look and you think just how privileged I am just to be in this sort of area, around all this sort of bird life and wildlife, which has just been to me fantastic. They're not easily scared. They often set out their watchdog type bird, probably a male. They'll sit out and just watch for any particular predator that may come, either a hawk or, say, us, for example. And if anything's seen, of course, he'll give the call and the others will distinctively all put their heads up quite high into the air, group together, and then take off.
Get it all over them. They go for a bath after lunch. But they need to sit out in the sun for a while before they can eat. Because they can't eat when they're cold. They need to warm up first. They often just sit in their food and warm up. They love snails. They sneeze a lot, so they get it up their noses and sneeze it out. They're mad little things. They love dog food. They love fresh fruit, baby food. That's what they've got there. I went up to Lismore in North New South Wales where there's a lot of dense tropical rainforest to look for this snake. I was told at first that I might find some in the banana plantations around there, but after looking with no luck, I turned to the rainforest expecting to find them high up in the trees, and I didn't know how I was going to get them out of the trees.
Looks promising.
There's logs over here, you try those, and I'll go to the rock. But as I was looking, I virtually stumbled over one. It was just lying on the ground. I was very lucky. When I first found the snake, it seemed so long I thought it must be two snakes. But after finding its head, and it was quite docile, I was able to put it in the bag with no trouble. I wanted to find a pregnant python for my egg experiment. Pythons because they lay very large eggs, which are very easy to work with, and I chose carpet pythons because there's quite an abundance of carpet pythons, whereas other snakes, other types of pythons like diamond pythons are an endangered species. You can see from those scars that she has most likely been mated with. It's not an easy job being a snake, but she's quite severely wounded and she'll need some treatment on those scars of hers. She's badly scarred and she's lost the end of her tail as well. You can see that here. She's obviously been in some fight with some animal, and that's a blunt end of the tail. It should be quite long and slender to grip onto small twigs. Now that I have her, I'm going to fix her up in a cage at the Australian Museum and hope that she lays her eggs around Christmas time or very soon after, because I want to get this project under the way by January, have it going in January. What I hope to do is the eggs that she lays, I'll have them put straight into an incubator, and the main idea of the project is to photograph the embryos developing inside the eggs, which hasn't been done before on snake eggs. That's about 7 feet all curled up. And she's a bit upset, but she's cool. So she's quite cool. So she's not, I hope, going to strike at me. Okay, I'll just put her back in because she's getting a bit upset and I don't want to abort the eggs, which is the whole purpose of having her. She's got hold of me.
The overall diversity of activities on the farm really keeps you involved and enthralled in everything that I do as a family unit, because you're around the family and you're doing the activities. It means quite a bit because you're always with the family, and it brings a very close sort of bond.
This piece of masonry on the place, Jim, this is a draft door stable.
Our family has a long association with the district. My grandfather wasn't the first, there were 2 generations before him.
Yes, I did when I was cleaning them out. I knew them all.
But it is through my grandfather that I've gained this link with my historical outlook on life, and it's through him that I really gained that love.
Fond memories in this place, Tim.
That's a nostalgic view of the whole district itself. Through that, I learnt etching as a medium to express the feelings that I felt for the buildings and architecture.
Well, I've been very fortunate in that my family have always helped me whenever I've wanted to go into science in any way at all. What I really appreciate is that quite a lot of times they've gone to sacrifices for me. Like with my project, Dad's been doing a lot of transport, and where he could have been doing his own schoolwork and marking exams and so on, he's driven me around to all these places.
Quite a while.
And we don't have carpet in the place, we don't have insulation in the roof, but we do have a computer, and I feel very lucky that they've given me things, whereas they could have had something else themselves. It's a good dinosaur, Stephen. Which one's that?
Triceratops?
One of the advantages of living in Dubbo is that the Anglo-Australian telescope is only 2 hours away. I was lucky enough to spend a week at the observatory for school work experience. The astronomers were very helpful.
Girls aren't expected to do science, and there's only 3 girls in my physics class. I'm one, and if one of those was to drop out, then it's likely that one of the other girls would too. If a boy is struggling with science, they'll keep going with it because that's what is expected of them. But if a girl is struggling with science, she'll just join her friends in a humanities class. And I think that's part of the reason why the girls don't do it, because it's not expected of them, and if they're having trouble, they just don't do it. One of the things I enjoy about the science, I suppose, is that the other people who are good at it tend to be boys. And that my boyfriend is into science, and he's going to be a surgeon too. The science is where we first were connected in any way. One of my friends once said that it was a relationship consisting entirely of mathematical equations.
That's where I live, out there. Somewhere.
The male sinks his teeth into her, and she's got signs of that, so I'm pretty sure that she's pregnant. Someone will have to go and help.
52 again. I think we'll leave that for the moment.
Yeah.
This sort of time of evening, everything really does come alive. The calls and mixed with the frogs, it's just totally mind-boggling at times.